Hello everyone. Very good morning to all. I hope you all are very well. Myself Rita Dabhi. On this Teachers' Day, I will teach you overview about the very famous modernist novel To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. So, let's start. Before starting the main information about To the Lighthouse, first I will give you a brief note about the author Virginia Woolf. So, Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf was born on 25th January 1882 and died on 28 March 1941. She was a modernist 20th century author and also a pioneer in the use of stream of consciousness as a narrative device. In her entire life, we find that she wrote many great works like Mrs. Dalloway, 1925, Orlando, a biography, 1928, To the Lighthouse, 1927, A Room of One's Own, 1929, The Waves, 1931, Between the Acts, 1941. And also, in her writing style, we find that portrays the impact of modernism. Strong about Victorian trends in writing like a well constructed plot, characters, usual sequence of climax. Virginia Woolf was interested in giving voice to the complex inner world of feeling and memory and conveys the human personality as a continuous shift of impression and emotions. In her novels, the omniscient narrator disappeared and the point of view shifted inside the character's mind through the flashbacks, association of ideas, momentarily impressions presented as a continuous flux. So, To the Lighthouse. The first publication of the Lighthouse To the Lighthouse is 1927, and also the setting of the novel is 1910 to 1920 Island of Skye in Hebrides, Scotland. Genre of the novel is a stream of consciousness. In the novel, we find that each section is fragmented into a stream of consciousness contributions from various narrators. Tone of the novel is elegiac, poetic, rhythmic, and also imaginative. In the novel, we find that plot is not structured upon what happened next basis, but emphasize on how the events are experienced by characters. The novel centers on the Ramsey family and their visit to the island of Skye in Scotland between 1910 and 1920. So, in the novel, we find that the novel divided into the three main sections. The first is the window, second one is the time passes, and the third is the lighthouse. In the first section, we find that the window opened just before the start of World War I. Mr. Ramsey and Mrs. Ramsey bring their 8 children to their summer home in the Hebrides. Across the day from their house stand a large lighthouse. 6-year-old James Ramsey wants desperately to go to the lighthouse, and Mrs. Ramsey tells him that they will go the next day if the weather permits. James reacts gratefully, but Mr. Ramsey tells him cloudy that the weather looked to be fall. James resents his father and believes that he enjoys being cruel to James and his siblings. In the second section, we find that time passes more quickly as the novel enters the time passes segment. Here we find that the second section opens with the 10 years passes. War break out across Europe, and Mrs. Ramsey dies suddenly one night. Andrew Ramsey, her oldest son, is killed in a battle, and his sister Prue dies from an illness related to childbirth. The family no longer vacations at its summer house, which fall into a state of despair. Weeds take over the garden and spider nest in the house. 10 years passes before the family return. Mrs. McNabb, the housekeeper, emplo- employs a few other women to help set the house in order. They rescue the house from oblivion and decay, and everything is in order when Lily Briscoe returns. And in the last part, we find that in the Lighthouse section, time returns to the slow detail in shifting point of view, similar style to the window. Mr. Ramsey declared that he and James and Cam, one of his daughters, will journey to the lighthouse. On the morning of the voyage, Delacy throws him into the feet of timber. He appeals to Lily for sympathy, but unlike Mrs. Ramsey, she is unable to provide him with what he needs. The Ramseys set off, and Lily takes her place on the lawn. Determined to complete a visit, James and Cam Bristol and their father's brusque behavior and are embarrassed by his constant self-pity Still, as a boat reaches its destination, the children feel a fondness for him, even James, whose skill as a sailor. Mr. Ramsey prays experience as a moment of connection with his father, though James so willfully resents him. Across the bay, Lily put the finishing touch on her painting. She makes a definitive stroke on the canvas and put her brush down, finally having achieved her vision. Here we find that the lighthouse is also a major symbol of the novel, and also Lily's painting art is a major symbol of the novel. So, major character of the novel is Mrs. Ramsey, Mr. Ramsey, Lily Briscoe, and James Ramsey. Apart from this, we find another minor character like 8 children of Mr. and Mrs. Ramsey, Andrew Ramsey, Jasper Ramsey, Prue Ramsey, Rose Ramsey, Nancy, Cam, and Roger, and also Mr. McNabb. So let's discuss the characters one by one. The first character is Mrs. Ramsey. Mrs. Ramsey is the loving and hospitable wife of Mr. Ramsey. She is highly domestic, focusing on her roles as a mother and wife, and also expresses intuition and emotional truth. She deeply admires her husband, although she cannot tell him that she loves him. She is responsible and strong, but she dies unacceptably in her 50s. In the second part, we find that she was died, and also she was a symbol of conventional feminine principle. The second major character is Mr. Ramsey. Mr. Ramsey is dominated by rationality and scientific reason, and also an intellectual philosopher. He is in search of truth and greatness, and he fears that he is rather inadequate for not achieving his aim. Neither affectionate nor sentimental, he nevertheless inspires admiration in his wife, although she becomes irritated with his insensitivity, and also he was a symbolic presence, and also portrays tone realism and egotistic despotism. The third character is Lily Briscoe. Lily Briscoe is a young unmarried painter, friend of the Ramseys. She is extremely fond of Mrs. Ramsey and feels a profound sense of emptiness after she dies. She begins a portrait at the beginning of the novel she cannot finish until the end. 10 years later, when the Ramseys reach the lighthouse. And also her painting as a symbol in the novel. The another major character is James Ramsey. James Ramsey is the youngest Ramsey's child. James is 6 years old when the book is begin. He adores his mother and is violently resentful of his father. He enjoys cutting images out of magazine and wants to desperately go to the lighthouse when he is young. So, major theme of the novel. Here we find many major themes of the novel like art as a mean of preservation, the subjective nature of reality, the restorative effect of beauty, the transience of life and work. Next, the symbol of the novel. Here we find many great symbols of the novel like the lighthouse, Lily's painting, the Ramsey's house, the sea, the boar's skull, and also the fruit basket. So, stream of consciousness. We all know that the genre of the novel is a stream of consciousness, and also Virginia Woolf, among the stream of consciousness writer, relies most on the indirect interior monologue, and she uses it with great skill. Into the Lighthouse, Virginia Woolf succeeded in producing a much subject effect through the use of this technique. This novel contains a great deal of straight, conventional narration and description, but the interior monologue is used often enough to give the novel its special character of the seeming to be always within the consciousness of the chief characters. Its attempt to describe the nature of mental life from within. So, thank you. If you have any question or doubt regarding this topic, then type your question in the comment box. I will try to give your answer. In the comment box, I have shared one link of online test. Go through this link and appear the test. Thank you.